Warm welcome everybody to today's webinar where we will be discussing how to maintain and sustain your employees. My name is Lucy Hayden and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the British Chamber here in Singapore. I'd like to take a moment to thank our Future of Work partners Prudential for their continued support of this campaign. We're joined today by Neetha Nair, Vice President, Head of the HR Centre of Excellence at Prudential Singapore, who will be sharing her insights into Prudential's culture and the initiatives they run to help develop employees and encourage innovation. Please do post your questions in the Q&A tool down the bottom, and these will be addressed following the presentations later on. I'm very pleased to now welcome our moderator for today, Kris Sasitharan, Group Head of HR at BECIS. Kris, over to you.
Lucy, thanks very much, and good afternoon and welcome to all our listeners and viewers and audience. Thanks for joining this sort of webinar, which talks about employees and talent and effectively talent management, which is a subject very close to my heart. As Lucy said, I'm Kris Sasitharan. I'm Group Head of HR at BECIS, which is a company in the distributed energy space, and I also ran my own HR consulting firm, Ren Advisory, focusing on HR practices for small and medium enterprises. Keeping talented employees committed to the organization is always important, more so in these challenging times, and many companies are poised to resume hiring, also they tell us when business confidence returns. However, the best companies also realize and understand that it's equally important to maintain and sustain their employees through retention and engagement strategies in these challenging times. In today's webinar, you will hear from leading HR, recruitment, and leadership specialists who will share the stresses and strains on both the employer and the employee and what businesses can do to create attractive environments and loyalty. Our first guest today, or panelist, is Rob Bryson, who is the co-founder of WeNetwork. Rob is a 22-year recruitment industry veteran with deep experience in Southeast Asia. He's worked for Michael Page and Robert Walters for about 10 years each, and now runs his own business. According to Rob, he took the brave / foolish, in his own words, decision to set up his own business with Network, with us in Singapore and Jakarta, catering for mid to senior corporate talent requirements in the startup and growth space. Rob has worked in Melbourne, Jakarta, and has been in Singapore for 3 years now. Rob will be talking about look for in employees, employers, and how this has changed in 2021, and also how this differs from sort of MNCs to SMEs. So without further ado, over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Kris. Much appreciated. Please don't hold the fact that I've been doing recruitment for 22 years against me. I know recruiters aren't always the most popular people on the planet or in the industry from an HR perspective, or indeed anywhere else. And thank you, Helen and BritCham, for the opportunity, and you, Lucy, to speak today. And what I'm going to try and bring to the table is a sort of bit of a feel for what candidates are saying. I think one of the advantages of being a recruiter on the agency side is we get to deal with all different walks of life in terms of companies, whether they be big multinationals, big local organizations, professional services, industry companies, manufacturers, whatever happens to be, and of course the tech world and the startup world as well. And what I've tried to do today is distill the information I've been getting from candidates, those that are potentially seeking work or looking to change jobs, and what they're looking for in their employer, and what's that makes that different perhaps this year and last year as we move forwards to historical requirements. So I'll try not to be too obvious, and I'll try not to talk about the things that we generally know about, and try and tease out a few concepts and ideas that might be interesting. So some of the big things, and these aren't in any particular order, but these are probably the top 5 areas that candidates are reporting to us in our business, and indeed the industry, having spoken to a number of my peers in the industry over the last 12 months or so that people are looking for. I think it's really important for companies to understand that the search for talent, if you like, and the employee's journey within that company from an employee perspective is very much all-encompassing. I think historically people have looked for HR perhaps in particular, or the L&D team perhaps, to really take the lead on employee engagement internally. And now what we're seeing is demands from candidates where they are taken from before even day one, before they even start, as a real integral part of the business from the top down. So things like, for example, and you've seen it employed across LinkedIn as a good example of various letters, if you like, to staff that senior leaders are using, some effective, some not so effective, to try and engage with their own people internally. And I've heard of CEOs doing welcome videos, for example, or live webinars to new starters across geographic regions or countries or sectors or whatever it happens to be. And that's having a real impact in the feeling of candidates feeling engaged as they move into a new business. I think that the second point is relatively obvious and straightforward in the sense that people are looking for that fully flexible and digital working experience, but perhaps it moves beyond the obvious into areas where certainly the companies that are offering best practice are really taking this fairly tricky issue by the horns. So, for example, I think the recruitment process itself in many companies can be improved, not so much the candidates that are accepted for interviews and the candidates that are ultimately hired, but maybe the tens or the hundreds that have applied for a job and really to an extent being ignored, not even had a recognition beyond perhaps, if they're lucky, an automated email saying thanks but no thanks. So how do you make that onboarding, remote onboarding or virtual onboarding experience best in class? And what are you doing to bring people into the fold early? Because research shows that those that feel engaged earlier on are more productive than the traditional 12 months and also much more likely to stay. And a little bit, I suppose, like a personal relationship, first impressions count. And if your first impression is a good one of your new organization, you tend to be more forgiving if things do go potentially south further on in the relationship. I also think we're seeing a real demand from employees across the board on the quality of training and development that needs to be offered. And I think this has perhaps moved from, dare I say it, and I'm not an expert in this field, but the traditional L&D areas, whereas to an extent it's been one size fits all, or one size fits the level, or one size fits the department. And what candidates are looking for now is perhaps more of a personalized and personal experience. Where is the L&D for them as the individual and where they're at in their personal journey or in their professional journey? And one of the great advantages I think we have in the modern world is the accessibility to online data. I was laughing with Helen last week about the amount of content that is now available on almost any topic and any subject and is being accessed by everybody, both from internally from an organization's perspective or of course just in the wider world. And I think perhaps historically the SMEs have been able to use the excuse of we're too small and we don't have the capacity to provide full L&D or personal development programs. And it's been, we're not one of the larger companies, so we can't cope with that. And I think now with some targeted thought around making content available to your own staff can go a long way to making them feel fully engaged in this piece. I think diversity and inclusion is obviously very topical at the moment and quite rightly. And I think the main thing that 2021 is teaching people and people should be looking for is there is more and more power with the employee now than there perhaps has ever been, especially with everyone's access to the internet. There's obviously a fairly high profile case in the UK with a fairly well-known company losing its chairman just last week because of perhaps some ill-thought-out statements that they made to an internal meeting, which then went on to social media and obviously caused tremendous damage to that company's brand and indeed to the internal morale perhaps of the business. And I think the important thing here is it's not just about appointing maybe a diversity inclusion officer as such. And I am saying this is a sort of middle-aged white person in Asia, so do forgive me please for that. But it's about really living it and seeing what we can do to reach out to those that may be disadvantaged or not included or whatever it happens to be, and not just talking about it, but actually demonstrating through your own staff or through your own messages within your organization to make a difference. Otherwise, your employees will hold you accountable. And I don't think that's going to change. And tying in with that point, I think it's very important that the alignment between whatever the employer says they do and whatever that they're planning to bring in terms of good actions, if you like, both internally and externally to the world or to their marketplace, is clear and they live up to it. And if there's a mission statement, for example, then what the company does and what the CEO and the senior leadership company within that company do to achieve that aim and what they do to bring their people along on that journey is an incredibly important thing for candidates in 2021. To give you a couple of examples just of some of the differences that you can make by doing some small things and the big impact it can have on staff morale and staff retention, is to give you an example, as we touched on there, internal opportunities are perhaps historically at least sometimes hard to find and hard to get. Nearly 60% of employees that I've spoken to through big ticket surveys think it's easier to find an external job than it is an internal job, which is fairly staggering. And millennials are saying one of the main reasons they change jobs is because I'm not getting perhaps the excitement or the opportunity to grow and develop. And yes, there might be an argument to say that 1 week in a job isn't long enough to change jobs, but as a generalization, there needs to be some form of understanding that offering people variety and changes and opportunities will keep them in the organization longer. And as we also touched on, if you offer the quality of professional and personal development that people are looking for, they will stay longer with you. And you will get a greater return from them, not just in terms of their own productivity, but in terms of what they're talking about externally to the marketplace about you as an organization and what you offer in terms of quality of career. And I think I'll leave it on one final thought, is that those companies that are really invested in their people as a perhaps what can my people do for me and what can we do for people is the change that people are looking for. And those that are personalizing that experience, that the whole world is being personally tailored nowadays, whether it's be adverts, for example, that we're all receiving to our smartphones, all our media content. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just happening. All our media content is being tailored through our choices and through the algorithms and so on. And to an extent, work is going the same way. So as an example of that, people are asking questions like why, for example, is maybe in your own organization, insurance offered at the same level, at the same amount and the same type of insurance that's offered, why would it be the same for me as a 26-year-old single person as opposed to somebody who's 55 and maybe has 3 children? And what can you do to tailor those type of programs to fit the individual employee rather than perhaps a group of employees? So overall, those that truly make a difference to their employees' lives and engage with them, and it may seem a bit obvious, are those the ones that can have the best opportunity in the search for talent and the retention of talent as we move into 2021 and beyond. Thank you, Kris.
Super. Thanks, Rob. That was great and some really useful insights, particularly some of those stats coming out around engagement and internal opportunities, which really provide some food for thought. So let's move on to our next panelist, Sonia Fernandes. Sonia is Chief People Officer, APAC at MediaCom. MediaCom is a Group M agency and part of WPP. In this role, Sonia is focused on establishing and maintaining the right organizational talent ecosystem to propel business growth in the region. She has 24 years of experience in HR management and transformational change and held leadership roles with global companies like KPMG, Bain & Company, and BBC, and comes with a global mindset, having worked in 20 countries. She believes in making human capital the driver of corporate value. Sonia is now going to sort of shed some light and talk about stuff like AI and strategic talent mapping. So over to you, Sonia.
Thanks, Kris. I'm still trying to get this. There we go. Thanks, Kris. Hello, everybody. So before I get into the two topics that I'm going to cover today, I just want to tell you a little bit about MediaCom, who we are and what we do and what's our philosophy. And that will set the background and the context to the couple of topics I'm going to cover today. So MediaCom is a media agency. As Kris mentioned, we're part of Group M, we're part of WPP, and WPP is the world's largest advertising, marketing, media, public relations and communications company. So at MediaCom, our philosophy is people first, better results. And this is not an HR tagline. This is our philosophy for the company. It's part of our business strategy. So our clients are some of the biggest brands in the world: P&G, Mars, Dell, Adidas, Sony, Shell, Coca-Cola, Fonterra, Uber, and so many more. And as you can see from these brands, engagement and retention of our people that work on their accounts is really important. So when people say, people are our biggest asset, people are they're very important to us. For us, people are our product. So they're the highest cost on our P&L. And so we take people really seriously. Right. So today I'm going to cover two topics. Amber, that's our artificial intelligence engagement platform, and strategic talent mapping. Now, we've got several programs that tie in together for engagement and retention, and they kind of feed off each other. But today I'm going to focus on these two. Now, companies tend to have traditional engagement surveys that they use. It's a survey that goes out to all employees. Doesn't matter whether you're 6 months old in the company or whether you've got a tenure of 20 years. It's a set of about 40 to 50 questions that gets sent to everybody. You get about a 50 to 60% response rate if you're lucky. That ladders up to regional or global. A report is prepared and comes down. That report is about 60 pages long, again, if you're lucky. And really, it becomes a struggle to have meaningful interventions to engage and retain people. So this really wasn't good enough for us, and we wanted something that's real time, where we have a finger on the pulse of our people, where we can intervene at the right time, where the right people hear about issues to make a difference to our people. So we went the artificial intelligence way. So we use Amber. Amber is an AI chatbot. It's the only bot in the world that asks questions as opposed to answers questions. And we piloted this in APAC. It was so successful in our region that we scaled this globally to MediaCom, to 105 countries, to all our 8,000 employees. So what is Amber? So we have questions that are customized to the employee's tenure. So if you're under 1 year with us, you will get questions from the bot that's related to selection, integration, connection with your team. Do you understand the work that you're supposed to be doing? Have you been inducted into the client? So on and so forth. Like that, we've got customized questions that hit our employees every 6 months or so. And they're dependent on the employee's tenure. So at 3 years, you get a different set of questions. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, so on and so forth. And this makes the questions meaningful, makes the responses meaningful. So customized question, there's continuous employee engagement, and we also have an anonymous feature for people that want to stay anonymous. So what happens to all of this? We've got all of this data coming through to us. We get real-time insight, we get sentiment analysis, we get an NPS score, and the important aspect here is that we've got data coming in that's macro, by region, by country, and all the way down micro to a single individual. So we can understand what's going on in departments, in functions, in specific teams. We got the data by clients, and right down to a single individual. So this helps us really understand in one fell swoop what's going on everywhere. We have a finger on the pulse, on the hearts and minds of our people. And in one view, we can get a temperature check of the company. The predictive analytics component is really important to us as well. So Amber has an 85% predictive hit rate. What this means is it tells us which of our employees are disenchanted and are likely to resign within about 6 months or so. This is important because when you're trying to retain someone who's already given you their resignation, it's too late. They're checked out, they possibly quite likely got a job somewhere else already. So we want to know when someone's disenchanted so that we can intervene and prevent them from going down the path of resignation. So the predictive analytics component is really important to us. So what happens when all of this information comes in? The issue that employees have is you make us, complete this information and you don't take any action. So we've committed to our people. We get real-time information from you and we will take real-time action. So this is some of the stuff that we've done. We've not only taken action internally, we've collaborated with our clients. So we've worked with 4 of our key clients and we've said, this is the information and feedback coming from the people working on your accounts. And it takes 2 hands to clap. We can take, and make interventions, but you need to come to the table and help us as well. So we're working with our clients to ensure engagement and retention of people working on their accounts. This is not an HR initiative. We've got CEOs and MDs that are held accountable. It's part of their KPIs and they're rewarded for it as well. So they collaborate with HR, but they're held accountable. We've also got a 99.8% annual performance review completion rate. This was a big deal for us because a lot of the feedback that we received was, we're not getting rigorous reviews. The quality of the review is not good. I had an incomplete review. So we have really ensured we put a lot of effort, and this is across 15 countries of Asia Pacific, just under 2,000 staff. We've got a 99.8% completion rate. We've also done strategic talent mapping, which I will talk to you about, well-being allies. We've worked on L&D, career management, mobility, helped with scope of work if there's scope creep with clients, intervened where there's team conflict, worked on client management, and just so much more. So there's been a lot of real-time action taken in response to the feedback. So I've told you about the system, I've told you what it does, I've told you the action taken. So what's the result? And the results are really important to us because a lot of the time HR initiatives can play in the fluff area and they don't really talk about measurable results. So we measured our results. We've got a 74% response rate, which is far higher than traditional surveys. And we've managed to maintain this now. It's coming up on 3 years. We retained 82% of employees that are thinking of resigning, of which 73% were millennials and 66% were women. So it's really helped with our diversity as well. And we've got a lot of employee experience drivers, it cuts across performance, vision, mission, learning and development, so on and so forth, many experience drivers. And 83% of them saw a positive impact. We've reduced our attrition. We've got an 81 engagement score. And our NPS, our Net Promoter Score, is sitting at 87. Now, this is a big deal for us because if you have a Net Promoter Score sitting around 60, that's a really good result. If you've got sitting around the mid-80s and late 80s, this is on par with the Teslas of the world. So we're really proud with what we've managed to achieve in engagement and retention through AI. The next topic I'm going to cover is strategic talent mapping. So what is this and why do we do it? We map our employees not just based on gender, but based on succession. We also map our leadership. We map not just their performance ratings, but also their performance in between ratings. Is it forwards, backwards? Are they stable? We have a 9-box plotted system for high potentials. We also look at tenure. This is important because what we've realized is high performers don't want to sit in their role for more than 5 years. So after 5 years, they get itchy feet and they want to shift. So we monitor the tenure of our high performers as well in these roles. And we then look, do we need to maintain them, change, promote? What do we need to do? We also look at risk. What's the level of risk, high, medium, low, for an employee? Are they, are they keen on leaving us? Are they keen on staying? What's the risk to the business if someone leaves? And we plot that on a map as well. We look at hire source to ensure that there's growth within the company. To reference some of the points that Rob mentioned earlier, a lot of internal employees find it hard to find a job within the company as opposed to externally. So we map this internally as well to ensure there's internal career growth. We look at mobility and we look at our high potentials. So there are many other parameters. I've shared a few here to give you a sample of what we do when we say strategic talent mapping. So what's the point of all this? The benefits to the business. Engagement and retention. It improves performance. When an employee knows that their career is being talent mapped, that they are being looked after in such a thorough, rigorous, structural way, it motivates them. We also look at skill gaps and what we need to do to help them close those skill gaps. Of course, it provides business continuity, succession guidelines, diversity, ensures career growth, maintains really good scores with our clients. So there's multiple benefits to the business in terms of engagement and retention. So from both the initiatives that I've spoken about today and the others that we do that kind of stitch in together, my key takeaways are the following. It doesn't matter whether you're in HR or you're a non-HR professional, whether you're a small, medium, or big business. There are a few things that we've learned in our journey along the way. One is operationalizing engagement and retention. If you use this as an ad hoc tool, if it's person dependent, if it's reactive, if it's piecemeal, it's not going to work. You need to have, these are structural issues, and you need to have structural solutions to be able to deal with them. These are not HR initiatives. Leadership is held accountable. Leadership is held responsible. So, a lot of the times, leadership has a finance team and a commercial team, but they're still held responsible for the P&L. And we follow the same philosophy. You may have an HR team, but you're responsible for people. Inclusion of people at all levels. And this is when you're creating or implementing programs, ensure that you have beyond your HR team, beyond your CEOs and your MDs, you also have champions and ambassadors in the business. And also for these programs to include people at all levels. So in our AI program, it doesn't matter if you're a new graduate in Guangzhou or if you're the MD of our business in Bangalore, everyone is included. And the last point is engagement and retention is the heart of our business strategy. So I'm ending with what I started with, people first, better results. This is not an HR strategy. It's part and parcel of our business strategy. And that's where you can get far more success with your engagement initiatives. Thank you. Over to you, Kris.
Sonia, thanks very much. That's really fascinating. Certainly the AI part of it was very interesting to hear. And kudos to you guys for the success you've had. Let's move on to our next panelist, Richard Mitcham, who's head of Asia Pacific at JDX Consulting. JDX is a global consulting company that provides financial services clients with flexible resourcing solutions in the areas of change management, remediation, technology, and advisory projects. Richard's been with JDX since 2012 and established the change management practice, which now has 180 consultants globally. And he's been in Singapore for about 6 years now to establish a business here and lead the growth in the region. Prior to that, Richard is also an accredited Prince 2 project management trainer and has managed large-scale technology and change projects across investment banks and the public sector. Some of the things Richard is going to touch upon, and I won't mention all of them, are understanding what people need and want through these challenging times, looking into the future and making engagement sustainable, adapting to the changes whilst not losing sight of the bigger picture, and still playing to your strengths. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Kris. And yeah, following on for some pretty interesting comments from the first two panelists, Rob there and Sonia, and I think there's definitely overlap with what I'm seeing here in the business. And obviously, not being a HR professional myself, kind of coming here from a business perspective, I joined the organisation JDX when we were 10 people in totality in our London office, and now we've matured as an organisation to globally 800 staff globally, and my team here has obviously started off from myself. We just got shy of 100 people within the region across Singapore, Hong Kong, and Australia now. So I think one thing which has been a constant within our organisation has been driving the culture. I think being a consulting firm where the large majority of our staff are seconded out to financial services organisations on a day-to-day basis where they're delivering projects, it's always been a key part of our business to make them still feel like they're a JDX employee, not even though they might be engaged on a year or 2 year long engagement staff working on client side. So this has always been a super important topic for us for retention, making them feel like they're within JDX and retaining them and motivating them to continue working with us. So I mean, in the past, a lot of that has been done through sporting activities, networking, using our offices as hubs. We do an annual ski trip. So all of these kind of activities where we get a lot of informal conversation going on between the teams, so they're sharing their stories on an informal basis. And especially when we were a smaller organisation, that was a very effective way of sharing industry problems rather than having to set up after work WebExes or Skype calls to do that in a more formal basis. Obviously, as we've matured as an organisation and grown more global and across more topics, that's had to mature and formalise anyway. And obviously the events of this last 12 months has kind of pushed that even further. But the one way that we've managed to really ensure that these topics and separate kind of side engagement pieces are ongoing is that it's not a top-down approach, it's very much bottom-up, and we empower all of our employees, and it's a part of our standardized career framework that all of our staff are input into these topics and also they're rewarded from them. So we've got a standardized career framework where you've got your core role, which for 85–90% of our employees is delivering consulting work to our clients, but then also they're all judged on people. So a very junior level, that's engagement, making more senior levels, it's around leadership qualities, etc. And then also so what other value are you bringing to the firm, how you bring together people to bring new ideas to the table, increase retention, and any of those other tangible topics where they're either adding to the top line revenue or reducing costs or increasing retention rates. So that's something which has been stable the whole period of time. And I think empowering our staff to bring those ideas to the table has definitely been a topic where they're rewarded. They work on these topics which they're passionate about themselves, rather than it being pushed down from the top, which gets way better attendance from all of these events because the teams are working on it themselves. And I think it's one of the topics which Sonia put together, and I think as a consulting firm, it couldn't be more literal, but our people are our products. I mean, we also have a huge amount of investment in training. We've got over 200 internal courses, training courses, as you move through the levels. There are a number of external accreditations, which JDX is an accredited trainer for. So a lot of the project management methodologies where we invest in the training in our people, which definitely helps with retention and attraction of top talent. I think coming into this last 12 months, I think all organizations have had challenges, and we definitely have as well, and had to try and navigate the situation. And our Chief People Officer has kind of anchored our engagement strategy around something that Neetha Clark at Engage for Success has laid out, which is the 4 enablers. And this is how we've kind of anchored our engagement strategy this last year. and I just want to spend a little bit of time of talking through. So these are kind of 4 topics. First one is strategic narrative. Second one is engaging managers. Third is employee voice, and the 4th is integrity. Around the strategic narrative, that's really around kind of what is the story of the organisation and where do you fit into that. So whether you've been there from the start, like I have, or where you're joining in, what part are you playing into that bigger picture? So I mean, things that we've put in place there are, as a part of the onboarding process, there are videos that we put together which are shared to every person, whether you're joining in Australia, Hong Kong, New York, London, or any of our offices, where the executive committee all sharing things about their personal life, their life pre-JDX, what they've done with us, and also sharing the story of kind of where JDS has come from through to our strategic vision. And so I think that's been really, really important, as well as obviously identifying your key culture carriers in each location, in each function, so they can then pass those sound bites as well. Also around the strategic narrative, I think it's more important than ever that you have consistent communication. That's something which I've definitely seen our organisation improve over this last year, that communication at all levels and the dissemination of that through the management layers. There's been a lot more focus on ensuring that that's consistent and very clear. Around engaging managers, so we're in the process of engaging external trainers to help us through this. So we're engaging external trainers to train all of our managers and all of our project leads on how to be engaging and also how to help check in. So there's 2 separate streams of training that we're doing. The second piece is a mental health first aid training, so not how to help with the mental health and anxiety and stress situations, but more of how to spot the signs. I think something definitely I've seen within the team over here, without you working in the office or checking in or meeting people informally, and when you're having to put in 15-minute, half-an-hour meetings, that's very easy to get dropped and miss some of the telltale signs that you would normally have in a working environment where you're in the office with people on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there's a number of our teams which are working in agile or scrum methodology, so they have their daily stand-ups anyway, which is easier for, but making sure that that is put in place across all of our teams, whether they be internal functions within our organizations or whether it be on the client side delivery piece. So it's around engaging managers, we're working on that. Third piece is around employee voice. So Sonia touched on some topics. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely upped the amount of formal surveys that we've done to get feedback across the teams. We've also, obviously, the training around the engaging managers, it feeds into ensuring that you have that full employee voice. And we've also invested in a lot of external support networks around counselling, drop-in sessions, making sure that our employees have got third-party places to speak up and have their views heard, so that that can be anonymized and then fed back into the organization around how we can make improvements. I think that's something which had come up internally, and without having a huge internal HR team within our organization, I think that was the best route for us to go and engage in externals there. And then the 4th point, I think Rob's already mentioned it. I think it's around the 4th point around of the 4 enablers is integrity. And that really is around the say-do. So I think I've seen this as well. I think with you being, without there being the personal touch of being face-to-face with people, there's less trust in, I guess, the written or verbal word, and if that isn't followed up on immediately within the timeline out there. Obviously, that should always be done anyway, but I think that is now more important than ever, especially with new joiners joining the organization. Without the level of personal touch that you could previously get from being face-to-face, the emphasis on ensuring that you follow up and say what you do, do what you say, is more important than ever. I think over and above those 4 points, I think there's a lot of literature out there and stats saying how anxiety, stress, working hours are all up this last year. I think a couple of other things which we've done, which we've seen success on, is around, we've given free access to the Calm app to all of our employees, and that's come with unanimous success. And also diversity has been a big topic for us as well. So, I mean, as an organisation, we run at 53% females globally, and have a good spread throughout the management layers of females, as well as we've done a lot of work around equal opportunity hiring, so all hiring managers. So I went through some training about 18 months ago now, for which is Harvard study around unconscious bias training, which was definitely helpful. And we're doing a big review at the moment around recruitment panels, to make sure that irrespective of what area of the business or location you're coming in, you've got a panel of interviewers from various, from a diverse background. So those are kind of a couple of other kind of just side topics which I want to raise, which we're definitely seeing success from. So to wrap up, I think first one would be around culture, and maintaining that culture, having that strategic narrative and those culture carriers at the forefront of your organization. And the second one is around empowering your staff and setting them up to succeed, getting those support networks where if somebody comes up with an idea, we are very passionate about making sure that we give the employees the support that they can execute on their own ideas, because the chance of success of that is much higher than that being kind of absorbed into a funnel, which then gets prioritized by the leadership team and management and then rolled back down. So those would be the kind of the two final points which I'll leave you with, and hand back over to Kris.
Super, Richard. Thank you very much for that. Really interesting to hear the initiatives that your organization is taking in these challenging times. Well, last but not the least, we move on to Neetha Nair. Neetha is Vice President and Head of HR Center of Excellence at Prudential Assurance Company, Singapore. Neetha has over 18 years of experience as an HR practitioner and consultant across industries and geographies, and she specializes in large-scale business transformation, change management, embedding new agile ways of working, and talent management. Prior to Prudential, Neetha was a director at PwC, Singapore and New Zealand for 10 years and led the HR transformation practice. Neetha is now going to spend some time and provide us with insights into Prudential's culture and initiatives that help develop employees and encourage innovation. Over to you.
Thank you, Kris, for that introduction. Just checking, can you hear me? Just can't see the screen. Can you hear me, Kris?
Yes.
Great, great. So I'm having a bit of trouble toggling the screen. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Prudential, as co-partners of British Chambers, I'm really privileged to be here and would like to welcome all of you to this session. It's really nice to have you all sign in, and for British Chambers to provide this platform, a series of these sessions where we can have these meaningful conversations. So thanks for this afternoon. Well, I've also been given time to do some sharing about how we engage and sustain our people at Prudential. So that's what I get into. As I heard Rob talk about what are candidates looking out for, and I was trying to do a checklist against, do we do this, and hopefully we do everything that they're looking out for. And I think probably you'll hear most of it there. I'm sure we have areas to develop, so 90% there, and which makes me really proud to say we're glad we are on track. So before I kind of get into how we do that, just a quick snapshot for anyone who doesn't know us. We are we're very focused, Prudential Singapore, as a federated model on Singapore. We've been here 90 years, and that's definitely a long time here, and that has definitely created over a period of time an organization, its own ways of working and culture. And what I'm going to talk to you about is actually how we think our cultural transformation journey and our focus on a purpose and values-driven culture is what is the secret sauce that actually engages and sustains employees. So as a high level, we've got about 1,100 employees, 5,000 financial consultants who work with our agencies, and 53% of our people are actually just 1 to 3 years of tenure, so relatively young in terms of tenure. And that's because we have been through a period of business transformation over the last few years where we expanded rapidly, brought on new capabilities, and you see that happening. So about 4 years back, when we had a new CEO come on board, we were given the mandate to actually transform our business, look at the way things were being done, such that obviously business performance could be better, but also that we wanted to challenge ourselves and differentiate ourselves from the rest of the insurers out there in the market. And hence, we want to stop focusing on just protection and savings and life insurance and gave ourselves a mandate to be a wellness company. Our aspiration is to work towards being a wellness company that looks out for overall wellness for our clients, our customers, our partners, and for our staff. And so we needed a purpose, and hence we came up with this purpose that you see, which is innovating to help everyone live well. And that actually formed the beacon, and everything that we do permeates this in terms of all the way from hiring, onboarding, developing our people, performance managing, looking at talent, high potential, whatever we do, this kind of leads us into how we innovate to help our people do well, and what does wellness mean for different people and different stakeholder groups. So all the way from, some of you may be familiar with the wheel in terms of social, emotional, mental, physical, intellectual wellness. We look at all of those aspects and see in people practices as well, how can we address all of those aspects and innovate in those practices such that we can engage and sustain our employees. So as we had a mandate to transform our business, we said we needed to also culturally transform our people. And we embarked on a journey of cultural transformation, and that started with this purpose. But this was underpinned by actually the 4 values that actually, again, are the foundation, which is innovation, collaboration, accountability, empowerment, and trust. And innovation being our hero value, as we had to, groundbreak, challenge, do things out of the box, move from the conservative insurance tag that we had to being a fresh, flexible, innovative company that's more techie in its field, and attract people towards that. So those are the values, and these were not something that the purpose and the values that were just given top down by the leadership. We went through ground up working sessions, road shows, where people actually came together, gave their inputs on what they wanted these values to be. How do we define these values? And so all of this was co-created through hundreds of sessions across hundreds of people coming together over months in 2016, 2017 to actually firm this up. And that created what I think earlier someone said about taking people along. They found meaning in this purpose, in these values. It belonged to them. And that, again, is part of engaging and sustaining our people. And so they were involved in co-crafting it. And this language of what each of these means in the context of Prudential Singapore is something that we educate our new joiners on all the people that are involved. And in every practice, like I said, whether it's performance management, we have an open feedback culture, 360, everything, we use those definitions, and people then understand it as a common way of looking at things. So all of this comes together as a strategic framework. And I said the purpose is the beacon, and the strategy flows through from there. The outcomes that we're looking at every 3 years, we review that, and the priorities, the business priorities for the next 3 years. And that kind of guides everything that we do in terms of the priorities for the year and what people practices we need to hence take to create a best-in-class workforce to support that. All of this may sound very fluff, and one could say, oh, these are all words and people do that, but we are a very performance-driven organization, and we are very numbers-oriented as well. We like to see data. So we do measure culture and try to make it as quantitative and tangible as possible. And we do that through the Barrett's framework, which is what you see here, the 7 levels of organization consciousness. We look at, we measure as in the values that are permeating in our culture. What's the organization health based on that? So ideally, if you just read it as an extension of a Maslow's hierarchy, but we are looking to be in higher order of this hierarchy, where we have more positive values, more values that are not limiting us in terms of the negative behaviors. And so through the period of cultural transformation over the last 4 years, every 6 months, we actually measured these. And these were not the 40-50 question survey, as earlier Sonia was alluding to, just 3 questions which said, who am I? What are my personal values? What do I see in the current organization? What are the values, and what values do I hope to see? And these 3 we measured them, saw what came out of it, what were the limiting values, and hence what do we need to do, what actions do we need to take, and holding people accountable, which is another of our values here. So this was measured, and the way the Barrett's work is, it measures it through an index called cultural entropy. That is total bad values over total values that you see in the organization. And as you can see, all the way from 2018 to November 20, when we did the last survey, we've actually come down. And so the lower the better, because you want lesser number of bad and limiting behaviors in the culture. Anything below 10 is healthy. So we're slowly getting there. And that's kind of been our indicator of how we are tracking along in terms of our cultural transformation, embedding our values in the organization, and what actions do we need to take each time. So for example, the latest one, people appreciated the innovation that they see in the culture, the continuous learning, accountability, and collaboration, but they did talk about work-life balance and long hours, which is actually a fallout of the transformation that we're going through, and how those are areas that they would like to see more focus on, and they desire it not to be there, right? So those are they inform the outcomes that we incorporate into the people strategy and see how we can work on some of those. Just also to mention, we've also just this year started baselining ourselves on a new engagement score, which is because of alignment to the region. So we're getting less federated and becoming more regional. And we're going to stop looking at our values measurement, because it should not be so many surveys and so many questions. But we think we've come to a place where we know how we're tracking on our values. The cultural transformation is coming to a stabilization. And so now we're looking to measure some engagement outcomes. We've just baselined ourselves, we're close to 70%. And then we'll continue to track that. But like I said, the key thing is the proof is in the actions and not just the data that you get. And there's a lot of data out there. We collect a lot of that. But outcomes from those surveys are shared with the people managers. There are platforms where we get them to log in their action items. They're supposed to complete that along with their teams, take action, and there's a feedback back to them. But all of those are also then incorporated into our people strategy and initiatives, which we deliver through 3 pillars, which is connect, grow, and succeed. How do we enable our people to connect? By creating a culture of innovation, collaboration, diversity, and inclusion. How do we enable them to grow in their career by building future-ready capabilities and high potential talent pipeline? And how do we enable them to succeed by creating an environment of well-being, all the types of wellness that I spoke about, and driving a high performance culture? So I'll briefly touch upon that as to how we bring these values and purpose to life through our strategies. So connecting through a culture of innovation, and it's not just about saying innovation is our hero value, but we actually trained all our 1,000+ staff on innovation framework, design thinking, conducting workshops. So we have a common language, common way of doing things, so we can go back and look into our functions, do process improvements, look at thinking out of the box in what we do. And we have an ecosystem of volunteers or design doers and innovation champions, as we call, who focus on doing these innovation projects, which are over and above their role. We don't separately pay them for all of that. There's recognition, but it's the challenge of doing and challenging status quo and doing something different. So creating that, enabling that with the tools and platforms that are required is something that has worked in terms of the culture. We also, with all of that needs to come innovation and recognition in terms of the awards. So every year we look at submissions from every division. People submit their innovation project submissions, and there are awards given out to people. So last year there was about 64 odd, which is like a huge number. And these are kind of how we reinforce that even though there's you may be doing this, but we constantly recognize across the organization. It's also not just innovation limited within the organization, it's also with external parties, because we do believe in innovating to help everyone live well, and that includes our communities, our partners. So Proof integrate platforms where we work with fintech, insurtech, health tech, med tech scale-ups to work on proof of concepts that are going to break ground with our customers, with other organizations, with other communities and industries. We help work with them, and also institutions of higher learning, where we are mentoring, our staff are mentoring some of the students to do some of this innovation work, Polytech hackathons that we run. So innovation is something that is upfront and center and has been the key driver for our business transformation, cultural transformation. The connect is also through with communities. Like I said, we are very mindful, as I said, about the higher order values, and that's about doing good with people, with communities. So there are initiatives where we work with early childhood or financial literacy program for children. Chaching is a very well-known brand, some of you see it on TV, and then digital learning for and senior, for the seniors. During the COVID period, when there were financial needs, kids who could not go to school, we had actually donated iPads and laptops so that we could help them continue their learning. And we have a 10 days volunteer leave that we allow our people to go and do volunteer work, so they can take it if they're going for any volunteer work, that we enable them through that. The connecting through a culture of diversity and inclusion. So different stakeholders, different kind of personas, people seek different things in how they can be engaged, how they sustain through this. We have diverse nationalities, but we're very much a core local workforce with Singaporeans and PR, 80% of them. The gender mix, I would say, quite healthy with 60% females. And we also were very keen to ensure that the seniors and mature workers were something that we looked into. We had done a study with Economic Intelligence Unit on Ready for 100, where we found that actually the average lifespan for Singaporeans is 84, and whereas the retirement age is at 62. So we were one of the first in Singapore to actually scrap the retirement age. We allow our staff to work as long as they want, as long as they can perform, they are mentally, physically able and have the right skills to do their role. We will have a job for you. And so we scrap retirement age, and that was another innovating to help our seniors and mature workers live well, because the age should not have to define them. We took that a step further by normalizing CPF contributions. So for some of you who may not know, in Singapore, after age of 55, the Provident Fund contribution goes down, the employer and the employee. But we said, why should there be a difference if you're doing the same role as somebody who's younger than 55? And so we are committed, and we do today, match the same contribution, which is higher than the legislated one, for anyone who contributes the same amount. So that all of this has been received very well in terms of how this culture of wellness for all our staff, our different stakeholders, enables people to feel connected with us. One would know that the employee experience is symbolized, or culture symbolized, to the people, to the the digital tools that are provided, as well as the physical workspace. So as I was talking about collaboration, that's if you were to walk into our office and look at it, it's not the traditional high panels and small offices where people sit cooled up as there. It's open collaboration. It's flexi seating, flexi working, work from anywhere, anytime. Our senior management, including our CEO, does not have an office. He has a locker, and he can sit anywhere. So you could be sitting next to the CEO one day, and it's just that, and it breaks away hierarchy, creates opportunities for collaboration for people, and a sense of trust, the value which we promote by saying, work from anywhere. You don't need to sit in front of my team or in office. We allow those things. And so I think that also is something that contributes to this. The second pillar after grow after connect is grow, and which I spoke about, contributing to future-ready capabilities, which is the intellectual wellness part, or building a talent pipeline for the organization. Over the last 2 years, we did a detailed, extensive work around strategic workforce planning, where we identified unique roles, what are the future capabilities, what capabilities would get optimized because of the impact of automation and digitization, what are the common capabilities we should be upskilling our people on. And some of those are AI, machine learning, innovation, design thinking, customer centricity. And we made these courses available to all our staff. We were one of the first financial institutions to partner with Neang, Poly, and CFT to run the AI and finance and machine learning. So as on date, 500 of our staff, which is 50% odd, have done these. And this year we'll have all of them go through it, which we think is something basic knowledge today people should be aware of. We have a continuous learning culture that we'd like to promote, and we create that ecosystem by providing LinkedIn learning courses, which are available to all, free, thousands of courses on that. So we saw 41,000 hours of learning over the last year. And I know that it's not atypical for during the COVID period, people were focusing on learning, but that was a 180% increase for us from the previous years, where people really focused on developing themselves, and nearly about a week worth of their time on that. There are other hackathons and opportunities for people to actually practice their learning. It's just about doing it online or education, but also experience and application, and grow in terms of not just our own people, but also committed to growing the Singapore future workforce. So the National Reskilling Agenda, where we partner with IBF, WSG on TIFIPs, SG United programs, professional conversion programs, where we've taken on board people, the young graduates or mid-career hires, to give them opportunities to work with us and develop themselves, and especially over the last year where a lot of them were impacted. So we committed to doing that, and hence have been recognized by IBF and including us, our CEO Dennis, for the Fellowship Award. And I think some of these recognitions kind of validate the investments we're making in this space, and also talks to what Rob was saying about people looking out for these. The other part is around internal mobility. So over the last 2 years, given the transformation context, we had a lot of opportunity for people to actually move into new roles, build new capabilities. And so 200 plus, that's about 1/4 of our organization nearly, have moved into new roles, internal mobility. Just over last year, 40% of our roles were filled internally. And these are super high numbers when you compare it to what some of them shared about not being able to recruit internally and the opportunities we provide to people. There's a high potential talent program, and I won't go much into that because I think most organizations have that. But just to say that even as we look at talents and high potential, we look at them demonstrating the values, the 5 values, and being aligned with our purpose. And as I talk about it later, into the performance management pieces, where we want them, we assess them, monitor them, develop them based on those values and purpose that we have. And final pillar, the succeed, which is how do we enable that ecosystem and for them to be successful. The performance is also based on how you deliver this, how do you live your values, and not just what you deliver. So it's not just the business objectives of I need to deliver sales or something else, but each of us has people objectives in our KPIs which are shared, and those are defined based on the outcomes of the culture survey or the engagement survey every year. So for example, this year it's around enablement and feedback and recognition, where we want to increase the focus on those within the organization. So we all share a shared people KPI, which is linked to that culture and engagement survey. And then also related to that is the 40% of our performance and rewards, hence, is linked to individual values, how we demonstrate that through our leadership behaviors. And we do this through official 360 feedback that we run at the end of the year. This 360 feedback is available through an app anytime, as we want to create an open feedback culture. And people give feedback to each other. So 31,000 odd feedback exchanged last year. And but coming to the formal part of it, it's visible, it's not anonymous. You can see your manager's feedback, you can see your direct reports feedback, you can't see your peer feedback as an exact one, it's a more consolidated score. But just to be able to promote that and link it to not just what people deliver, but how you deliver it being equally important, that's what we've kind of built into the performance. And of course, that leads to how we get rewarded from our annual performance bonus and so on. Finally, last part of it is the whole wellness ecosystem and enabling the person to succeed. So I spoke about flexi time, flexi working. We have family Fridays, the wellness week, which is quite common in the financial services industry, where you got to go in for a block leave, but it's not mandatory for all staff. It's typically just for specific staff, and we make that as mandatory for everyone. We want all our staff to go on a block leave for 1 week where you cannot access your devices, and so give them that feeling of wellness per se. We make the employee assistance programs available, and over the last year, we pivoted a lot of it to digital. So work from home playbooks, to how to manage remote teams, how to work remotely, and to the extent of remote onboarding. We, because of the health concerns and safety, we actually delivered laptops to all our new joiners at their doorstep. So that they didn't have to come to office or have to do that. So some of these things and others, I think, are quite common for some organizations around maternity and paternity leave, and the discounts and annual leave encashment during the period of COVID, and all of those things. So a big focus on wellness. And I'll kind of just wrap this up in the end by, sorry, I'm not able to move my slide. Okay, by being recognized by the industry with all these awards, where I think whether it's learning and development or the engagement or talent acquisition, we see that recognition externally, but we also see it internally through these engagement survey scores, where people have voted positively. Like I said, not that we don't have anything to work on, there are areas definitely to work on, but all of this does give us a lot of confidence that we're on the right track. And as I finish off, as we've been innovating our people practices, going through a cultural transformation of the last 4 years, we're now at the brink of another cultural transformation, because we are becoming more regional with our counterparts. We're adopting a common purpose, a broader purpose, which is we help people get the most out of life, and 5 new values. And so hopefully, as we go through the next few years, and maybe a few years down the line, I'm talking to you about that, we hope to embed this again in everything else. It's probably restarting the whole journey and reorienting people, but we hope to have the same kind of success. So thank you, that's all from me.
Wow, thanks, Neetha. That's brilliant. I mean, there's a lot that's obviously kept you busy over the last sort of 12, 14 months. I guess probably more so since the pandemic hit. I'm sure you'd have done all of this in normal circumstances, but I guess you've had to sort of sharpen all of this in the current climate. In terms of questions, whilst we wait for for submissions from our participants, maybe we can just kick off with 1 or 2 to sort of help stimulate this discussion. If I can throw this to the panel, the topic of this webinar is maintain and sustain employees. So if we think about that, and all of you have spoken about different ways and different initiatives that your organizations or in your experience you've taken. I just want to kind of twist this slightly differently, or give it a different twist, which is usually people tend to hire to backfill roles, or there's a role and you tend to hire people based on perhaps a job description or something specific you're looking for. But in the current climate where to some extent travel's restricted, your candidate pool, you could argue, is either increased or decreased because there are no barriers, but at the same time, people are not traveling. So maybe sometimes you're restricted to the candidate pool within the location. Either way, I guess in the current climate, what practices could employers adopt to hire for potential instead of hiring for experience? Which is what usually happens. People have a set of criteria and they keep looking and keep looking and keep looking. And sometimes they find people and sometimes they don't. But how could employers adopt a kind of hire for potential mindset? Sonia, do you want to go first? I can see you sort of smiling.
Sure. So look, this has been part and parcel of what we do, Kris, in media. You know, some of our highest performers with the longest tenure with us did not have media experience. You know, we've hired an optician's assistant, we hired a researcher, we hired a mathematics graduate, and these people worked on some of our biggest global clients. They were some of our highest performers with the longest tenure. So a lot of the times within the media industry, I find people are a little bit more courageous. They hire, they go beyond, the limited box. and they hire from other industries. They hire, it's a lot of it is hiring for potential. Even internal growth, you know, as I showed you earlier with our strategic talent mapping, we've got a huge internal growth within the organization, and people haven't done, you know, they haven't handled a global client before, they haven't handled a P&L before, and you give them the opportunity, and, you know, you hire them for potential. I was hired with no media experience. I came from KPMG, and I remember asking, you know, at my interview, are you sure you want to hire someone with no media experience at all? And they said, absolutely. So I think, you know, if you have a little bit of courage, it pays in the long run. That's our experience.
Cool, cool. Thank you for that. That's very heartening to know. Does anyone else kind of want to add to what Sonia has just said on this?
Yeah, I think from my side, I think similar. I don't think there's necessarily been huge changes recently, but I mean, as an organisation, I think we probably see a bit of a disparity between corporate ranks on how much we hire for potential based upon, because at the graduate level, we're fully hiring for potential, right? So I mean, if you look at kind of our graduate hires, it's not finance students from SMU at all. It's, even though we do have some there, it's a real big blend. So we look for diversity in backgrounds, we look for diversity in what subjects that they've covered. I know when I first started, when I was joining, there was people early days doing zoology in their degrees, like some really diverse background. And one of the advantages of that is that obviously all the benefits of a diverse team, but also especially in region, we can hire a lot around languages, etc. But what it's taken for us to get to that point is we've had to build out such a robust internal training program, right? So to really get them up to speed with everything that our clients would expect of our staff before they get there. So we've heavily invested there, and we invest a lot of time up front before they go out and deliver onto our clients' engagement. I think at more senior levels, obviously our clients come to us for skills and expertise in a specific topic. So that is definitely a bit more challenging. And I think the other piece, actually very similar to Sonia's point as well, is around promoting internally. I mean, I think we do a very good job at spotting up, giving people opportunities to stand up internally if they've got an idea, or they bring a business case to the table around new area that they're interested in, that they want to build out. I think I touched on it earlier, but I think that really brings a lot to the fore. I mean, I'm probably one of those breathing examples of putting a business case forward around setting up Asia and moving over here. So that's just one soundbite. Rob, cool. I think you had your hand up.
Rob, did you have something to add, or?
Sorry, Kris. Yeah, I lost you for a second there. Yeah, this is something that I've always found fascinating, having recruited for a large number of companies, either directly or indirectly over the years. And I think both Sonia and Richard have made two very valid points. One, it's got to be the mindset of the company. That's essential. It's sad to say, but the majority of companies will come to recruiters and say, we need somebody who can already do the job. And the bit that's really interesting to me about that is, if you look at it from the candidate's point of view, why would you take a new job if you can already do it, in terms of doing it all? Because that person, if they're good, needs to have professional and career development and personal development and everything as well. And so there's got to be a little bit of risk on the employer's side as much as the employee side. And I think in Singapore, in some areas at the moment, we are a relatively small island, and notwithstanding the rise of remote working, there is a talent shortage in some spaces in Singapore. And I think some of the companies that have got the resource and to an extent the time are really implementing quite a lot, especially with government support, to try and upskill the workforce. Both that's perhaps slightly more mature workers looking to career swap. And I think the government's done a fabulous job with providing incentives to companies to do that. And I also think it's chipping away at perhaps the relatively risk-averse culture that we live in this part of the world, in terms of the individual being prepared to take on something new. Because it's got to come from the individual as well. The individual's got to take on something new. And Richard's point around having robust internal training programs is essential, because you will have a very disengaged workforce if you bring them on into something they've never done before, and then give them no support to be able to do it. That's a recipe for disaster, unfortunately. And I think one of the advantages we have now with the embracing of digital technology, the ability to train across, historically training's often been done by the line manager or some poor person in L&D who's expected to be an expert on every single field across an entire organization. And now the ability to tap into expertise within your own organization across departments, for example, across line managers, whether it's bite-sized, pre-recorded, virtual meetings, virtual lunches, lunch and learn sessions, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. But I think that the avenue is open now to being more engaging in that onboarding piece, which will promote, hopefully, and we are seeing it happen across the board, more risk taken in terms of hiring people who may be not ticking all 10 boxes.
Cool, well, thank you for that. I guess an obvious sort of follow-on question, and you all kind of touched upon it briefly, is on that sort of supporting the individual, right? So it's very well to hire somebody for potential, and then what do? Do you just let them sink or swim? So the question for the panel here is, what tips could you give to our audience around some of the practices? I mean, you mentioned things like onboarding or training, etc. But what is it? Is there anything else that employers can think of? And bear in mind, some of our listeners are sort of SMEs as well, so they may not have the wherewithal of large MNCs. So if you're coming at it from an SME perspective, and you hire somebody for potential, and you take that risk, what sort of things can you do in your own way that sets people up for success?
Maybe I could go first, Kris, can you hear me?
Yes, please, please.
I think I'll take it twofold. First is the fact, if you're in Singapore at least, and I don't know if people are dialing in from other countries, what government support is there, but in Singapore there's a lot of funding in terms of reskilling and allowing people to take on new skills, and funded by the government. So all the programs that are out there, in terms of the SGUP trainees or the TIFIP and professional conversion programs, when you actually bring people on board, there is funding available to get them trained, and salary allowance in some cases, depending on what kind of it is. So that for SMEs per se, that's a big thing, right? As you bring on someone who doesn't have the skill sets, and then you've got to invest in training them and building them up, but that is kind of mitigated by this government support. And maybe it's not relevant for other countries, but whether it's there's a funding support or not, just taking our example internally, the fact that we're able to drive 40% internal mobility rate, or the fact that there's such huge, a few factors. Number one, it's the mindset. It's the change, the accepting mindset that the managers, and it doesn't come easy to be saying that I'm going to trust that if you are 70% there, the 30% gap I'm going to fill, and that I'll teach you, I'll invest in you, and I'm looking at a longer term thing there, because the person has the right aptitude, the mindset to take on something new, right? So the tackling the mindset of whoever's taking on these people, such that they're open to taking on people with these kind of limited or relatively lesser skills is important. What we do as a structured program per se is something called 7-Up. So every time someone moves into a new role in another division, the fitment that we look for is at least 70%. You've got the right aptitude, you understand the specs as much as possible, you've got transferable skills. 30% we're ready to retrain you onto that. And so over the next 3 months of the person moving into this role, we give them the training support through the LinkedIn Learning or an external training, which may be technical, and there are check-ins with the manager on the job support. So you've got to give them the support to say, okay, you can move into these roles, but you've got to also create an ecosystem of enabling them to transition into these new roles. And that's what's important, I think.
Okay, cool.
I mean, just to add a small piece on there, I think you do need to invest, right? I mean, there's a lot of support out there, but on picking up on your SME point, Kris, I think I mean, thinking back when the early days of our organization, there was still robust training. It just wasn't all e-learning and as pretty as it is now. It was practitioner-led, practitioner-created. So you're investing your time on the content there, and also and also you're kind of overlapping with that kind of strategic narrative, that story where you fit in the culture carriers piece and you kind of intertwine. That is how we did it, right? And obviously as we've matured as an organization, when you get multiple locations, making sure that that consistency and quality is maintained is obviously key in how you transition through that. And obviously it's that striking that balance around making sure that you've still got the culture carrier and strategic narrative, as well as keeping that quality and scalability of the training. And I think the other point is just around getting a success, a structure that incentivizes and rewards your staff for going over and above, putting their hand up, doing things that they enjoy over and above their day job, and making sure that structure works to mutual benefit of the organization and the individual.
There's some very interesting stuff coming out of the States in particular at the moment around gamification for learning. There's quite a few startups in this world who are trying to basically, I suppose, a bit of a generalization, and I'm generalization very much at generational level, but we're seeing a few companies now look to gamify their onboarding process and some of the learnings they want people to do, because research is showing that if people are engaged and learning the way they've grown up, which with smartphones and so on is a different way perhaps to the way I grew up, that the different way of learning is perhaps more engaging to different generations or different people depending on their own psychological makeup. And there's quite a lot of research going into this at the moment. Quite a few companies are beginning to adapt these type of policies, which are really quite interesting for the future.
Yeah, and there's a Singapore, on that point, Rob, there's a Singapore startup that's getting some really good traction, doing some work with a couple of the banks here called Gametize, doing exactly that. Yeah, I think a lot of our clients are definitely looking at ways where they can increase the effectiveness of training, and gamification is definitely one thread in there that's getting a lot of traction right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's I mean, I've heard a lot about that, and you're right. Even with things like onboarding, you know, given these times when you get your laptop delivered, etc., and you haven't even seen the office you're going to be working in, that becomes very important, because it's you're keeping people, you know, you're sort of hooking people on, really. You know, in the old days, you could have had people on a monthly basis turn up and network and have a sort of monthly onboarding sort of session, which kind of doesn't happen right now. So it's important to find different ways of doing that. The other part of the webinar title was kind of sustain, or the other word that was used was sustain. So if I sort of change that or spin that into career sustainability, and I know we've spoken, and you know, Sonia's mentioned a couple of things, and Neetha's mentioned also about you know, practice with Prudential and the high sort of rate of internal hiring and internal mobility. Both these organizations, you know, both your organizations are large or relatively large in terms of numbers. You know, if you're a company in Singapore that's got, you know, 75 or 100 people, or you know, less than 200, how does an organization of that size kind of manage to sustain its employees and provide them career growth? What sort of things can they adopt in their own style that helps them retain employees?
I mean, I know, Kris, I'd go first. I mean, and then obviously we can get the structured HR professionals point of view straight after that. But I mean, from a practical perspective, there's advantages of being that size, right? I mean, there's more to build out, right? There's more topics that the employees can put their hands up to do if you empower them and get that structure around there when you are that size and scale. Because you, so I mean, I always flip it on the head. Yes, you might not have a full, well-versed HR team, or you may do, right? Probably 200 people, you probably would, right? But you might not have the structure and the dedicated professionals that these big corporates would have to be there. But what the advantage is, you can get your staff engaged and driving and feeling ownership of parts of the business, whether that be P&L or whether that be them driving a change through to fruition. But so that would be my 2 cents.
Now, I've got a take here, Kris, which kind of answers your previous question about, sink or swim when you hire someone for potential. And it kind of touches on this one as well in terms of sustaining in a small business. And what we've realized is, we have all of these programs, the induction, the training, and all of that. And everybody does that. You gamify, you've got fancy platforms. And the heart of it is inclusion and belonging. If someone feels they belong, and you see that through, you can see that through people's behaviors, you can see that through the processes, that level of belonging can transcend any insecurity, any worries, any feelings that you have. And we've noticed that even though we're a big organization, we've got big teams, big clients, so on and so forth, that level of inclusion and belonging, where, I remember the emails that are sent to you, welcome to the MediaCom family, reach out for, and this comes from the exco, the leadership team, it comes from everybody, and it's just part and parcel of the culture. Welcome to our family and reach out to us. So you're not alone. And the same thing goes even here with a smaller organization. You have such an opportunity to build a connect for inclusion and belonging, which you might not have in a bigger organization. When you have 400 people sitting in one office, as opposed to 75 people, everyone knows everybody else. So we find, for example, some of our engagement scores can be really high in smaller offices because everyone connects with each other so much more. So I think to Richard's point, it's a great advantage, actually.
I think companies can get better at asking. I think in massive generalization here, but over the years, often L&D and internal courses for personal and professional development are often put on internal notice boards or internal setups and so on. And it's expected the individual goes to visit the HR part of the organization and go and do it and so on. I think, again, as I say, this is not all companies, there's just some, and feedback we get from candidates is nobody ever asks me what I want. And nobody actually says, hey, what would you like to do? What do you actually know about our business and what we do? Are there areas where you're interested in learning and developing your skill set in different pieces and so on? I think companies, as generalization, are very good at doing it for graduates, and much less so at people 3, 4, 5, 6 or mid-level career levels, 20 years into their careers. So I think if companies actually ask their employees more rather than tell them what they want, it will go a long way to improving that retention piece.
Cool. Thanks very much, Rob. Thank you very much, Sonia, Neetha, Richard, Rob. Listen, I've kind of learned loads as well. It's been enjoyable sort of moderating this session, if you will, on behalf of BritCham Singapore. I'm hoping that the listeners have also sort of taken some useful insights away. What's fascinating for me, hearing you all speak, is that it's funny how sort of the people side of things, if you want to call it HR or personnel or human capital, whatever the terminology people use, what fascinates me is over the last sort of 18 months or so, to some extent, good old-fashioned HR has kind of come back. Because you think about sort of 50, 80, 100 years ago, and you think about the Quaker companies and Cadbury's and so on. And there was a lot of engagement there. There was a lot of looking after employees. There was a lot of, human touch around that. That kind of seemed to go away I'm guessing kind of in the sort of mid 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But it's interesting that it's kind of coming back now. Everyone's talking about culture. Everyone's talking about engagement. Everyone's talking about connecting with your employees. So fascinating to hear you all. Been a pleasure sort of doing this. And thanks for all your thoughts and insights. And I'll hand back to Lucy.
Thank you, Kris, and thank you to all of our fantastic speakers this afternoon for sharing your time and your insights. There was plenty of great tips there. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you also to Prudential for your continuing support and working with us on the Future of Work campaign, and to those of you who joined us to join this session. So we've got some great webinars coming up over the next few weeks, and I'd like to highlight just a few of those. In a couple of days, on Thursday, we'll be hosting an analysis of the Singapore budget, which is being presented this afternoon in Parliament. On the 23rd, we have an Asian property market outlook for 2021. And beginning from the 4th of March, we begin our International Women's Day virtual conference. So that's a fantastic event, and please do find out details and sign up for any of those events on our website now. Following on from today's event, you'll receive a feedback form. Please do take a moment to fill that in. Let us know what worked, what you'd like to hear more of, what topics we can provide for you. And we look forward to the next event and having you join us again soon. Thank you very much.